Howdy y'all, Caleb here. We're talking today about one of our probably lesser known heroes. We're going to talk about the SKINK Starseer. Now this guy, he kind of sits somewhere in between the, Croak and Slon and the SKINK Priest and SKINK Star Priest. He's not quite as auto-include as some of these guys, but he has some incredible uses in our army. You're going to want to be looking at this SKINK Starseer if you're looking for some heavy melee in your army, and you want to make sure and get those charges off. So let's look and see what his War Scroll does for us and how we can apply it to some of our more common units that we're going to see in our armies. So the SKINK Starseer, his War Scroll here we got pulled up. He has 5 wounds on a 5-up save, so he is a fairly squishy hero, and he doesn't have any ward saves or anything special like passing off wounds, so you do have to worry about him getting sniped off the table. So be careful of that whenever you're deploying him. He can get killed fairly easy. He has a movement of 5, so he's pretty slow. He's slower than the guys on foot. He's about the same speed as the Slon and stuff. As he's riding that same, floating chair that they've got. Bravery of 6, which, isn't too important on him. You're usually going to have him in, you're going to have him in both armies. We're going to look at, he fits both in Starborn and in Coalesce. So you may have to worry about that Bravery in Coalesce if you're running against somebody who has some Bravery attacks. But overall, if it's getting down to that, you're probably in trouble anyway. His missile weapons, he does have some missile weapons, 18-inch range, 2 attacks, 3s and 3s, -1 run, D3 damage. So he can actually, kind of plink off some stuff. So don't forget about those attacks. It's a decent attack there and can do D3 damage. His melee weapons, 2 attacks, 4s and 3s, -1 run, D3 damage. Again, try not to get this guy in combat. That's not what he's for. He does fly, so that's kind of good. Helps him with movement whenever you're trying to get into it. Keeping him within range of stuff he can fly over whenever he needs to. His abilities. Here's where this War Scroll card gets good. At the start of your hero phase, roll a dice for this model. On a 4-up, you receive 1 command point. So he's got that same thing that the Starseer, the Star Priest has, and Slon has, and Croak. You can see it's better than the Star Priests, who's on a 5-up. So it has the same 4-up roll as like a Slon and Croak, but only has 1 chance. He only costs 140 points, so you're likely to make up his point costs with your command point generation here. And as you know, with any Seraphon army, we use lots of command points, so this is always a welcome addition to any War Scroll. His Astromancer staff. Now this is where we're really going to take him to use him in our army. This is the ability that we're looking for. At the start of your charge phase, you can pick 1 friendly Seraphon unit wholly within 12 of this model. If you do so in that phase, you can attempt to charge with that unit if it's within 18 of the enemy instead of 12, and you roll 3d6 instead of 2d6 when making the charge roll. So now here's where he's very useful. He's increasing that charge distance. Not only is he increasing the roll that we make, but he's also increasing the range at which we can attempt a valid charge roll. Because in the core rules, you can make a charge roll if they're within 12 inches of an enemy. He gives us extra range for that. You can make it if they're within 18, and we get to roll an extra dice in that. So you can make some pretty long charges with this guy in support. So that's going to be important. We're going to look at that on some units here in a few minutes. All right, the magic. He is a wizard. He can attempt to cast 1 spell. He doesn't have any pluses or pluses to cast or unbind, like the Slons and Croaks do. You can give it to him using a Constellation if you really want to make sure and get a spell off, because he is a hero, so he can take the Constellation buffs that we have in Seraphon. But the spell that is unique to his War Scroll is actually pretty good. I really like this spell. And if you're taking him, this might be one reason that you take him over the charges. His Control Fate it casts on a value of 7, which can be a little bit more difficult to do when you have no pluses. But pick 1 unit within 18 that's visible to them, and that unit basically has -1 to their save rolls. If you pick your unit, a Seraphon unit, you add 1 to your save rolls. So it's not only is it a great spell. I mean, -1 to enemy save roll is an awesome spell. I'd take that on its own. Or add 1 to my save rolls. I'd take that. Now we have some flexibility here with this model. We can change it depending on what we need to do. If we're close enough to the enemy, we can apply it to them. If it's a turn 1 type of cast, we can apply it to something that we think might get into combat on the enemy's turn. So we have those two things that we're going to be looking at on the SKINK Starseer and what we can apply. There's going to be a bunch of different units that we can apply his buffs to. I'm going to just take a look at one real quick, and this will kind of give us a brief rundown of how it can be used with a melee unit. And my first example here is some Saurus Knights. We're taking this in Coalesced and Kotal's Claw with the Firelance Battalion. So these knights here, they don't move very fast on their war scroll. They're kind of positioned more as heavy cavalry, even though they're not really on their war scroll. But they only have an 8-inch move. And so if we're starting off on a 24-inch deployment away from our enemy, they're not going to be able to make a charge in turn 1. You can see we move up 8 inches, and we are still a good 16 inches from the enemy. So that's not a valid charge range normally. Now in Firelance, they do get +3 to their charges. We'll probably have the Constellation at +1 to run and charge. So we have some extra range there, but because they're more than 12 inches from that enemy, no matter how many pluses on them, we can't create a valid charge. That's where our SKINK Starseer, shown here as a Slon, because I don't currently have a Starseer. I had one I kit bashed a long time ago, and I'm not sure where that went. So we're gonna use this Slon here as our SKINK Starseer. He allows them to make an attempted charge from 16 inches, and so they do get to roll 3d6 dice in this instance. We'll add +3 from Firelance Battalion, +1 from the Constellation, and now they have a possible charge of 22 inches. You could max out at 22 inches if you rolled high on the charges. So they can make in that charge from all the way across the board due to this Starseer. But not only that, those Saurus Knights are now, if he got a spell off, they're on a 3-up save. And in Coalesce, they're already -1 damage. And so you're talking, this one little guy makes him much more maneuverable and also much tougher in combat when they have to roll some saves. So we've got 20 wounds there from these knights, and they're on a 3-up save, -1 to their damage. So they should be able to stick around. They can hit a long distance. If you've got your Carnosaur here from the battalion, he's the one that gives them that extra range on the +3 on their charge. And SKINK Star Priest let them do mortals. And you can really do some work with this. In a unit that's usually pretty slow, we're making them to where they can alpha strike turn 1. Part of the problem with the Starseer is that you're going to be sending your units off pretty far. And so you'll lose some of the buffs from your other support heroes that activate in the combat phase. So be wary of that when you're sending these units off, because when they make that charge, here we go, they're now out of range of this Carnosaur's buffs. In his combat phase, that he needs to be wholly within 18 of these guys to give them some extra buffs. And so there is a little bit of a trade-off there. You can send some units all the way across the board, but you might lose some of those synergies that you have to tick off in the combat phase. So there's one use for him. We're using both of those abilities there on those guys, giving them the extra range there on the charge, giving them a long bomb charge, and then also that +1 to their save is pretty awesome. If you happen to get them closer into combat, and later in another turn he's closer in, given something -1 to their save is basically giving your knights -1 rend, and that really makes their attacks a lot better because they don't have any rend, and so that you're effectively giving them rend by -1 save on the enemy. Pretty nice little buff. So what else can we do with these? These are the Knights. That's a pretty good unit to apply them to. But on his War Scroll card, if you notice, it doesn't say, it's not keyworded Skink, it's not keyworded Saurus, it's keyworded Seraphon, any Seraphon unit. And so we can use this on just about anything. Some of my other favorites for the Starseer is, hey, some Kroxigor. You know, Kroxigor seem like they'd be pretty slow. They have an 8-inch move, but we can get a run and charge and Thunderquake. We can get +1 to their run and charge on the Constellation. And we can get the 3d6 charge from SKINK Starseer. And so now these Kroxigor have a maximum threat range of 34 inches. You should be able to clear these guys across the board turn 1 and slam some heavy beef into the enemies. Especially if they have hordes, those Kroxigor in Thunderquake can run in there and really, really clean up. You'll see them kind of, getting that +1 to their save on the Kroxigor really helps them stick around, especially in Thunderquake. If we move out of Thunderquake, though, let's look at Salamanders. You know, Salamanders are one of the big baddies that we've got right now, and Salamanders have the same move. You'll see that 8-inch move a lot in our army. But we can get run and shoot and charge from the Skink Priest. So add the Skink Priest to this little get-up we've got, and now they can run and shoot and charge. You can also get +1 to run and charge from Constellations as normal, and apply the SKINK Starseer's long charge to that, and now they're shooting. They have a threat range for their shooting of 27 inches, and they have a threat range for their charge of 34 inches. So you should be able to hit most things turn 1 with these Salamanders. And you don't have to use a teleport on this group of Salamanders. So if you want to hit with more than one group of Salamanders, take this SKINK Starseer, and you should be able to get in your teleporting Salamanders as well as your Salamanders buffed on the run and shoot from the Skink Priest and by this guy. So you can hit kind of double time with these Salamanders if somebody is, if they're lining up back far thinking that your Salamanders have a maximum range there, you should be able to surprise them with some hijinks here. One thing to note is a lot of things in Starborn, you're gonna want to teleport this guy, and so if he's starting over here, and you're got some units that are in deep somewhere, teleport him in. Pop him in 9 inches away from the enemy, but in range so that you can create charges for those important units. He's a great unit to teleport to buff up your charge because it happens at the end of movement, and his buff doesn't happen until the charge phase. And so he's a great unit to teleport, and that you can still get your support stuff off from him after the teleport. I think the biggest winner, though, with this guy and where his ability just becomes absolutely amazing is with the Pteradon Riders. Now, these guys are already incredibly fast, so they're absolutely gonna outrun this SKINK Starseer on the table. So you're either gonna be teleporting this guy, dropping him in via Draco's Tail subfaction, but you need a way to get him where those Pteradons are gonna be because they are so fast. They got a 16-inch move that they are going to be tearing across the board, and you want this guy to get his buff off in the charge phase. So Pteradon Riders, they have a 16-inch move. You can get the same run and shoot and charge from Skink Priest applied to them because they do have the Skink keyword. Of course, the +1 to run and charge from Constellations. And then we add our big charge bonus from the SKINK Starseer. So their shooting, which is, it's pretty random. It's a D6 shot. Is 29-inch threat range from where they start turn 1. So that's pretty nice. You can definitely hit some stuff with those shots. They have up to a that's not supposed to be 17. That was obviously the wrong number there. Let's go with a 27. they have up to a 42-inch threat range on their charge, which is important because the Pteradons drop their bombs, and so you need them to move over things. And so you need that excessive range on these guys, and you need to make long charges so that you can move these Pteradons over things. So I think this SKINK Starseer is vital to those Pteradon riders, so that you can make sure and move them over the targets of opportunity that you have. This is a great. This is the unit you want to be teleporting in this SKINK Starseer to, wherever they're at, and giving them that buff so they can move over the things that they need to drop their rocks onto. So SKINK Starseer with the Pteradon Riders is a great combination to use there. Some other units that I think it works well with, the SKINK Chief on Seraphon. You'll see a lot of times you can build a list where your SKINK Chief on Seraphon is going to be kind of that ballistic missile, that turn one, he's just shooting up the board and is going to slam into the enemy and just try to bog them down in their own zone. He can have a great save. He can have run and shoot and charge in Thunderquake. And so then you can apply this to him, or a Skink Priest or something, and you can apply this to him to make sure he gets that long charge and can really cause some problems. The Dread Saurian, man, this is a fun. If you have a Dread Saurian, I think a Skink Star Priest is worth it, because you really need some mobility out of that out of the Dread Saurian. You're going to want to have a Slod near him. This will just be an extra little buddy to tag along. And he's going to give him a +1 to his save, which makes those 35 wounds even harder to get through. And, of course, you'll have the Dread Saurian and Coalesce, so that'd be 37 wounds in Thunderquake. And so this will make him a 3-up save. And makes them a lot harder to chew through. But you also want to get him to where you can drag his base into as many units on the charge as possible. So having that 3d6 really helps your Dread Saurian get into things, especially with such a big base. You're gonna want that buff on him. Carnosaurs, they get a lot of buffs on, especially in Kotal's Claw, on the charge, and so you want this guy around. If you're running some Carnosaur builds where you're going to try to buff up 1 or 2 Carnosaurs and send them in to cause problems, he can buff them up as well, and give them a 3-up save instead of a 4-up save. They might stick around a little while. They're a little fragile as they are now with that 4-up save and nothing extra to keep them alive, but getting them that +1 to save would be nice. Melee skinks. We've talked a little before on the channel about how you could run melee skinks, and that's the guys with the clubs and shields and a Stegodon Chief to kind of buff them up. And now you could have a unit of melee skinks doing mortals, and they would have a 4-up save, a horde of 40 skinks on a 4-up save with the Starseer, and making long charges and getting in the mix. It could be viable. We have a horde melee unit there in Skinks that could be kind of fun. You have to get a lot of buffs on them, but they could work that way. Also, Saurus Warriors. I don't think Saurus Warriors are our best melee option. I really like Saurus Knights a lot more than Saurus Warriors. But if you need to make those charges with those warriors and get them in, he's definitely a way to do it. And also, I think if I was taking a Skink Starseer with Saurus Warriors, he would be there just to pop that spell that would make those Saurus Warriors a +1 to their save. So now I have a bunch of warriors that are a 3-up save, and it would make them a lot harder to deal with. So that's our Skink Starseer. I think he's quite versatile in that you can use him on any Seraphon units, and there's a lot of different options to shoot those guys across the field. And in this game, mobility is king. And so when you can grab objectives with some shenanigans from 3d6 charges, I think he can make up for his weight in points there. He's 140 points. I think he's a pretty good little hero to take. All right, guys, that's it for this strategy. Looking at this hero. We'll catch y'all next time. Out.